Throughout the Mario Kart series, some tracks have been lucky and others just haven't been. And the Booster Course Pass is no exception to this rule. So many of Wii's iconic Nitros made it in, Funky Kong came back from the dead, and we got Wii Rainbow Road to end it off with a bang. Simply put, the BCP loved Mario Kart Wii. But despite the massive onslaught of Wii content, fans couldn't help but pinpoint the one track that was unlucky enough to be excluded from the BCP, Toad's Factory. At first glance, it feels absolutely ludicrous that Nintendo had the guts to not bring back Toad's Factory. Plenty of people can remember racing on this track as a kid, so it's far from being the most obscure. It's also an incredibly fun track to race on, it has cool shortcuts, and on top of that, it's way better than the plasticated garbage that is Toad's Circuit. Yet to this day, Nintendo still refuses to remake this track. Thus, the exclusion of Toad's Factory from both Tour and the BCP begs the question: if Nintendo was willing to go to such great lengths to represent Mario Kart Wii and remake so many other iconic tracks from across the series, why didn't they add Toad's Factory? Why do they have the tendency to choose other, more generic tracks over this literal masterpiece? And most importantly, how has it managed to remain this unlucky of a track? Those are the questions of today's video. After plowing through the beginner terrain of Luigi's Circuit, the cowboy lands of Moo Moo Meadows, and the banger that is Mushroom Gorge, you finally arrive at Toad's Factory. And the course truly lives up to its name. You find yourself driving on conveyor belts, trying not to get squished, and the biggest highlight of all, boosting out of the factory like a speeding bullet. And hey, if you're a super cool Chad, you can even do a huge gap shortcut. Given how fun it is to race on this track, it makes for a satisfying way to finish the Mushroom Cup. With that said, it's honestly really surprising that Toad's Factory is one of only 5 Wii Nitros that didn't make it into Deluxe. But for the other 4, there are good reasons as to why they were left out. Luigi and Mario Circuit are simply way too generic, boring, and aren't that memorable to have gotten a remake. As for Wii Bowser's Castle, while it is an amazing track on its own, it would have been way too complex for Nintendo to remake from scratch. This is clearly seen in that Nintendo has historically abstained from resurrecting non-SNES or GBA Bowser's Castles, with very few exceptions. Looking at you, 3DS Bowser's Castle. Finally, although Dry Ruins made it into Tour, it's still vastly overshadowed and underrated compared to the other Mario Kart Wii Nitros. In fact, Nintendo choosing Koopa Cape over Dry Ruins in Wave 5 of the BCP just proves my point here. Additionally, Dry Desert already being in Deluxe basically killed its chances from the get-go. And yes, while both Daisy Cruiser and Daisy Circuit made it in, they're still fairly distinct enough despite sharing the same tomboyish theme. But none of the reasons outlined above make sense for Toad's Factory. It's not a generic circuit track, it's very iconic amongst the Mario Kart fandom, and it wouldn't have been that hard to remake compared to either a Rainbow Road or Bowser's Castle. So, what could have been Nintendo's reasoning for leaving it out? Well, while Toad's Factory is popular in its own right, the same can also be said for the overwhelming majority of Mario Kart Wii's track lineup. I mean, think about it. Basically every other Nitro in Mario Kart Wii, with the exceptions of Luigi and Mario Circuit, have a fanbase of their own. And while Nintendo tried their absolute hardest to incorporate Wii's most iconic tracks, they also had to add in tracks from other games too. The sad part is that there's only a finite amount of room to accommodate so many retros, especially fan favorite ones, meaning that there's always going to be that one unlucky track that always gets left out. So, there's a slim possibility that Nintendo might have wanted to add Toad's Factory, but simply left it on the back burner after having to remake so many other tracks for the BCP. But okay, let's just imagine in a hypothetical scenario that against all odds, Toad's Factory makes it in over, say, Toad's Circuit, and everyone is happy. However, it is quickly discovered that the remake isn't as good as fans wanted it to be. The textures look gross, the conveyor belts were nerfed, and it simply feels like a downgrade compared to the original. This brings us to the second reason why Toad's Factory didn't get remade. Adding it to the BCP could have made it look worse, from both an aesthetic and gameplay standpoint. We've already seen how Nintendo massively screwed up when it came to the first wave. Paris and Tokyo were absolutely horrendous, they ruined the cars on Coconut Mall, and Toad's Circuit is, well, Toad's Circuit. Adding Toad's Factory in as part of the first wave guarantees that it would have inherited the same flaws that plagued the BCP during its early stages of release. Additionally, we've seen how Nintendo is willing to remove certain challenge aspects for certain tracks, such as the cars being weaker on Moonview Highway, making it more convenient to traverse DK Mountain, and even removing the electric zaps on Koopa Cape. And on top of that, we wouldn't even be able to do the iconic shortcut near the end. But given the fact that the BCP tracks gradually improved and got better over time, why not add it into, say, Wave 5 for instance? Well, while it would have been absolutely amazing from a fan's perspective, it still wouldn't be fully ideal. If Toad's Factory were added alongside the other Wii courses present throughout the BCP, it would have likely made fans even more upset at the excess amount of Wii. Not to mention the fact that it could have paradoxically had the effect of replacing yet another fan favorite track, thus leading fans to complain about the latter instead of Toad's Factory. In short, you can't have your cake and eat it too. We also have to keep in mind that every single DLC track was initially designed for Tour before being ported over to Deluxe, meaning that Toad's Factory had to be in the latter at the bare minimum for it to even have a shot of getting into the BCP. So now we have to consider why it wasn't added to Mario Kart Tour in the first place. And quite frankly, I can't think of any good reasons. I initially hypothesized that it might not have worked well with Tour's mobile engine, but there isn't a single mobile feature that I can think of that would have hindered this track. The most likely reason for why it wasn't added to Tour probably boils down to the spotlight issue once again. I mean, Tour has way more track remakes compared to Deluxe, and given the fact that Nintendo was willing to bring back even the most obscure of tracks, the chances of Toad's Factory were ruined from the get-go. There's also the fact that Nintendo remade a lot of duplicate tracks, mainly SNES and GBA ones. And there's also the RMX tracks too, which only further ruined the prospects of a Toad's Factory resurrection. Now, with Mario Kart Tour no longer receiving any new content, the track lineup is finalized. Simply put, in order for Toad's Factory to have made it into Tour, Nintendo would have had to put less attention on the duplicates of certain tracks, ignored bad ones like Choco Island, and took fan requests into consideration. Finally, the biggest reason for why Toad's Factory hasn't been remade is simply because they're saving it for the next Mario Kart game. I mean, think about it. Toad's Factory isn't the only track missing from the BCP. Mushroom City, Wario Coliseum, Airship Fortress, Luigi's Mansion, and GCN Rainbow Road are all tracks just begging to get remade. If Nintendo has been keeping these tracks secret for so long, then this enormous collection of retros could all be incorporated into the next game's track lineup. If that were the case, think about all the hype that would ensue. Also, even though it's been a really long while since we last saw Toad's Factory, it isn't abnormal for tracks to be left in the shadows for so long. For instance, Grumble Volcano and Wario's Gold Mine were both left out of Mario Kart 7, but by the time Mario Kart 8 came around, they returned as retro tracks. Similarly, Boo Lake and Riverside Park both had to wait 12 years before getting a remake. And if you want to go even further than that, N64 Yoshi Valley had to wait a whopping 18 years before finally getting a remake. Additionally, Toad's Factory being added would offset the amount of bad or mediocre retros that will inevitably be in the next game. Like mentioned previously, Nintendo always has a habit of remaking bad tracks to spice things up and avoid repeating the same track lineups from game to game. Having tracks rotate in every now and then is a really good thing when it comes to making a good track lineup, as it prevents the roster from becoming too stale. But on the other hand, bad retro tracks tend to get backlash from fans, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. Throughout the Mario Kart series, luck has been the determining factor for what each game is bound to look like, and it is the very thing that makes or breaks any track's chances of being resurrected. Toad's Factory will never be an exception to this, and it's bizarre that it's one of the few tracks that has yet to return in a future game. It had nearly everything in its favor. It's an iconic track, it's very fun to race on, it absolutely dwarfs any ordinary circuit track, and on top of that, it's part of the one game that the Booster Course Pass had a heavy bias towards. Yet in spite of all of those reasons, it continues to be left in the shadows to this very day, and is often pushed aside in favor of other generic tracks that tend to take up the spotlight. But if Toad's Factory somehow or tragically isn't brought back for the next Mario Kart, it won't be the end of the world. While we may speculate and predict endless possibilities for what the retro lineup may look like, the Nitro tracks will always go far beyond our imagination. Maybe we could get a new track themed around our girl Toadette, where we could see tons of treasure tracker references, or perhaps even a construction site. I mean, she's come so far ever since her debut. Going from a partner to a captain, this girl is totally on fire! She definitely deserves a track of her own, and if Toad's Factory isn't on the table, then how about we go with Toadette's Treasure Cove? Or maybe Toad's Factory could become like Wario Stadium, in which a track bearing the same name as the original gets added in, but otherwise is completely different in terms of layout. At the end of the day, mourning over one loss shouldn't discourage us from being hopeful and optimistic over what's in store for us in the next game. And with the constant rumors and leaks about the next Mario Kart being in development, you can expect the speculation and predictions to start going rampant once again. We have a lot to look forward to. New characters, new tracks, and just how much hype the new game will be worth from here on out. And if Toad's Factory is able to defy all the odds and make it in anyway, then hey, it would definitely be the cherry on top by far. But nevertheless, Toad's Factory will continue to be regarded as the unluckiest course in Mario Kart history, and it remains to be seen just how much longer it will continue to remain as such. Thanks for watching, everyone.